Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the ETVT podcast, where you're free to build your perception from an infinite world of possibilities. I'm your host, Elijah Vargas. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the ETVT podcast, where we're all about perception. We are having another book review today, and I'm super astounded. I have been wanting to review this book for a while now, and I finally finished it. Can't say I understood it completely, but I finished it. And this one is Dr. Viktor E. Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. This wasn't necessarily what I thought it was going to be. I bought the book because I had seen quotes shared from it on Instagram. And what I wasn't aware of is Dr. Frankl is actually a German who is a Holocaust survivor, pardon me. And the first half of his book is actually about his experience in the concentration camps. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of he's pretty much like the founder of Logotherapy. So I don't know exactly how it's pronounced. I believe it's Logotherapy, but it's hard to tell because sometimes things aren't always pronounced how they look like they're spelled. But this book put a lot of things into perspective. First of all, when you read the first half of the book, to me, it makes me think about how easy things really are for me, for us, for most people in the modern world during a time of it is a time of peace. I know there's a lot of conflict and stuff that's going on, but as far as we're concerned, where most of my listeners are concerned, we are in a time of peace. And there's a lot of questions that you start asking, or at least that I started asking, that I don't typically ask on a day-to-day basis, and things I started to think about that I don't typically think about, like how insane it is that one man can convince a whole society to do such horrific things, the fact that people are capable of doing such horrific things. But here is a twist. One of the things that Dr. Frankl made me consider that I never considered before is the fact that there is good and evil in any type of situation. When you grow up and you think about the Holocaust, you don't think about guards that would have had compassion, guards that felt bad, or guards that were going against orders to take care of, the Jewish members who they felt bad for, guards who recognized that it was wrong. Another one, and there actually is a story that he talks about in here, is there was one who was one of the most horrific doctors in the concentration camps, who did terrible things to people. And years down the road, he finds that this person ended up being the kindest, like most helpful person. And basically he changed. And that's when you get into the lines of psychological studies, any type, you start to realize how almost unpredictable things really are, especially in humans. Because anybody who has gone deep enough in any type of these studies, which is odd. I mean, I took computer science, but for some reason I took psychology and sociology. Those were my general classes. I think I chose one, but some of them just popped up there. And to me, it only makes you realize how much we actually don't know. And in a way, it's fascinating. It's very fascinating, and it gets you amped up. And you're like, wow, I am in this lifelong experience of learning. But then on the flip side, for a society who would rather have the answers given to them, a society who really just wants to work and not have to worry about anything and wants everything taken care of at the end of the at the end of the day, who wants nothing but stability. I think most people don't want to feel that way, and in many ways it terrifies them. This is still part of man's search for meaning. I'm getting to the point. But when you read books like this, it just expands your mind in realizing how deep everything goes, whether it's human emotion or human actions, and all those are split into like a million different little intricacies, and it's it's amazing. So let's go ahead and let's get right into this because I had shared some points. I had mentioned earlier that Dr. Frankl has the book split into two parts, and I had made some markings in this book that I think you guys would really enjoy. So one of the first things that really stood out to me in terms of personal lessons that I felt, and let me be clear, I'm gonna put in this title something about dealing with grief because this is something that's also very important to me, and I have also had this personally requested. So I know that this says "Man Search for Meaning," and if you think about when the original version of this book was written, which was actually in German, uh, times were a lot different. So I say that this can apply to anybody, and I don't think anybody should get offended. It would actually be a very terrible and somewhat ignorant and almost entitled thing for somebody to say, "Oh, well, it says man, so I'm not going to read it." It's not necessarily true. You know, it's not one of those cases where it's only applied to men, nor does Dr. Frankl feel that way. It's just I believe that this book was written to tailor at what was understood at the time, and at the time, I don't think things like this were specified for a woman. But if this book was written today, I think it would be retitled as "A Person's Search for Meaning" or something along those lines. I just want to put that out there. So one of the first things I marked, I'm not going to go through every single one of them because I marked a lot, uh, is I'm going to give it a little bit of context, and it has to do with love. Because throughout the book, one of the things that Dr. Frankl recognizes is a person has to have a purpose. There was one part of the story where he talks about how the death rate in the concentration camps have tremendously increased, whether it was by suicide or disease or starvation. What he was explaining is that a man's ability to survive, you can almost predict when you're in those situations, uh, when somebody has given up to the point to where death is very close. And what I like about this book is that he writes, as he's in there. So a lot of this information is pretty much data that is there, that is accurate, and that you can write from. So it's not like he's talking about theories or he's talking about made up things. These are things that actually happened. And in my opinion, it's a deeper look to things than what they teach you in school, which we'll get into. So one of the things he talks about is the importance of purpose. And I think this is one of the basis of logotherapy is a person who has a defined purpose, has a meaning, and ultimately will survive just about anything as long as that purpose deems relevant to them. There's actually a quote. If I find it, I'll let you know. But he gets that from an original, I believe it was Latin writing, and he quotes it a few different times in here. I may have marked it, but we'll see. So the truth, I'm going to quote from the book. The truth that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. That there's so many ways that you can take this. And before I get specifically into this, I do want to say this. When you find challenges going on with your loved ones or your family or even yourself, when you find yourself met with challenges from your day job or traffic is frustrating you, I want you to keep this in mind. I really do. This has to be one of the greatest times in human history for us to be alive. Even I complain about a lot. I'm not saying things are perfect, But the fact that for a majority of us, especially in the Western culture, a majority of our issues are showing up to work on time, keeping our family happy. We have grocery stores right down the road. We have vehicles that we can all use to get to places. We have entertainment up the butt. I mean, access to movies and films and books. We can walk to a library and we have thousands of different options that we can pick from. We can hang out with our friends on the weekends. We can instantly get in communication with anybody that we want to. It's the reason why I'm saying it is this is because we love all of these things. And in a way that's good, in a way that has brought peace. But I think what has happened is there is only so far that love in artificial things can go. One of the things that this book, I feel like I kind of already knew this and I may have said it in the past, but one of the things that the book pretty much reminded me of is human connection is something that can never be replaced. And the strength of that should never be underestimated. And I've been wanting to say this for a while, and maybe I just didn't know how. But I can share this in an experience that I've had with my family recently. And part of the reason why I want to specifically focus on grief is for a loved one. And in many ways, I'm still trying to figure this out, which is part of the reason why I picked up this book, because, I have been trying to learn how to deal with a multitude of things, if you can't tell. So the power of love. It's no secret that it's very important because the majority of things that keep us going are things that we love, right? But I do believe that there is a scale to this. And I think that at the top of this scale or pyramid, hierarchy, whatever you want to call it, is the irreplaceable and the most powerful form of human love, the love for other people, the love for your wife, your husband, your sons, your daughters, your family members. And from that quote that I read earlier, obviously I thought about, the woman that I love and it made me think about my future where I have a family with kids and someday, well, hopefully, by the grace of God, I'll be a father. And I already feel that there will be nothing more that I love more than my children. And then it makes me think about how it must feel to my mother. And then it makes me think about how much love I have for my mother. And it reminds me of there were multiple experiences where I have worried about people dying before I do. When I was overseas, I would have days where, especially in the beginning, because you never know what to expect, where I would think that either I'm going to die or somebody that I love is going to die before I ever get the chance to see them again. And that was a terrible feeling to have, almost somewhat traumatizing, honestly. Yeah, although it's pretty much self-inflicted thoughts. But on the flip side of that, I knew that I was coming home to things that I love. And I prayed. I pray and again by the grace of God, I was blessed to be able to have the experience. But I prayed that I would get to come home and make the people that I love proud and make the get to talk to the people and see the pride that they had for the things that I was doing in the ways that I was. And a funny thing about that, a thing that kind of shows the power of that type of love is out of all the experiences that we have had, I mean, we've had some very bad experiences. That love never breaks, that bond never breaks. Does it have moments of separation? Yes. But if it's true, real, genuine love, what you should experience in a family, it can't be broken and it won't be broken. Right. And if it is broken, it is because something there has completely deviated from the point of which it truly was. For example, if my mom all of a sudden tried to kill me, right? That's not something that the mother I love would do. At that point, that's not the mother that I loved, right? Or vice versa. If I tried to kill her, like there, there are things to be said about that, and I only say that because I feel like some people will misinterpret that in a way, and that's not what I'm talking about. I recognize that just because someone is family, people can still be so horrible that you can't love them. And I would never tell somebody to do that. But and in a scenario that I would deem should be normal, in the ways that I believe it should be, is a family's bond should be unbroken. And then when you fall in love with a person who has made your wife, and then you have children, that's your family, right? So just from that little piece of writing and hearing Dr. Frankl talk about how important love was to a man's purpose, I think it's true. And I think we make a lot of decisions on a day-to-day basis. Like I said in the beginning, we do a lot of things that we don't necessarily want to do because we want to support the people that we love. So he goes into so many examples of that in the book, but he also talks about how a lot of people have lost that sense of love. And back to the point of grief, Dr. Frankl's wife did not make it. There were a lot of people's wives or husbands who did not make it. And in the second part of the book, when he gets into logotherapy, he talks about pretty much dealing with that. And I want to get to that part because the truth is there are many unfortunate circumstances in life, but the point of logotherapy is to pretty much understand that there are things you can and you cannot control. But at the end of the day, your purpose is defined solely by you. So if you lose somebody that you love and a serious unfortunate event happens, you have to then make the determination on or the decision on if that's either going to make you or break you. I know it sounds corny, but the way he explains it is the make you or break you thing is a simplified way of saying something extremely complex, like many things that we say and do in today's world. There's a lot more to it than we may think. So let's get back into this. Another thing that I wanted to point out, and I'm kind of going from notes that I have to different parts of the book because they do combine, they intertwine. The context in the beginning is very important to understand, the details in the second part of the book. So Dr. Frankl also recognizes that a man being or a person being good or evil doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily 100% depicted by the environment that they're in. Is nurturing or naturing extremely important? Yes, especially for children. But there will never be a society where just because one leader is evil or certain things are evil, that 100% of that civilization or of every person is going to be good or evil. And I know that's a bold statement, especially because I'm not God, but I think that there is reason to believe that. I think that it's true that up to this day in written history, even during biblical times, when you had the Messiah roaming the Middle East and just doing such amazing wonders throughout this world, there were still human beings that chose to be evil, human beings that chose to deny him, human beings that wanted to commit the ultimate sin of basically there's a term for it, but when you mock, when you try to disprove the Holy Spirit, I don't remember what the term for it at the moment is, but the point is you can have the best of the absolute best on this earth, God's Son Himself, and there is still going to be good and there's going to be evil. And I think it's always been that way. And this book has one of the most recent examples, which is the concentration camp. So let's get into this next quote. No man should judge unless he asks himself in absolute honesty whether in a similar situation he might not have done the same. And what this is in reference to is this. But it is not for me to pass judgment on those prisoners who put their own people above everyone else. Who can throw a stone at a man who favors his friends under circumstances when sooner or later it is a question of life or death? So I should have read the part that I read second, I should have read first. But the point of that one was this, and this made me think about so many things in the modern world, is we judge each other so heavily. And this really made me think of the story, which Dr. Frankl is Christian. But it really made me think of the story when this whole crowd was judging this woman, and Jesus comes, and long story short, put in very simple context, from my understanding, and Jesus comes and says, "He who has not sinned or is basically perfect may cast the first stone," because they wanted to stone the woman. Nobody could throw the stone because nobody was perfect, but they were judging this woman based off decisions that she made and the person that she was, and calling her all sorts of these nasty things when the truth was none of them had the right to judge. Like that's the point of that biblical story, and that's pretty much what Dr. Frankl is saying here, but from more of a personal perspective, because I think we read these stories and we understand these things and we can preach them to we can preach the gospel, we can preach them to everybody else, but the complicated part comes where do you actually understand that in your own human psyche, right? And I love that Dr. Frankl admits this because he's speaking from his first person point of view, where he basically says what I just said. I see what's happening. I don't agree with it. This is wrong. But who am I to judge? Because I don't know what I would do if I was in that same situation with the same opportunity. It's it's just the truth. And that also made me think about myself because I, as a person too, again, it this book is called Man's Search for Meaning for a reason. I know I'm kind of going off on a rant here, but this is probably one of the most detailed book reviews I can have, which, by the way, side note, this will be the difference between my fictional and nonfiction book reviews, or more, I guess you could say, educational writing book reviews, because I love books like these, but I'm trying to get a good mix of both. So we had an amazing fiction book. Shout out to Aurora Astra. I hope you come on this podcast. I've loved emailing you so far. I am crossing my fingers. Um, Great talking to you, by the way. You were an amazing character. But I'm trying to read fiction and nonfiction, fiction, nonfiction. I'm trying to have a pattern here, all right? Leave me alone. But to the point is I too, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm a saint, despite the fact I come on this podcast and I say the things I say. Sometimes I hate hearing myself. I don't always, if you haven't noticed, I don't always completely go back and revise and re-listen to my podcast because I find myself speaking on things that I am not good at putting actions into. So I love talking about my idea of the perfect world or whatever it is and all the wrong that goes on in this world, but I can't act like I wouldn't or don't do the same thing. If somebody from Congress came right now and said, "Hey, all you got to do is spew these lies. We will have you set for life. You'll be rich. Nobody will know you. Don't worry about it. You do anything you want in the world. We will give you everything you need." I don't know if I'd take that. I don't know. I might say, "You promise?" Like the opportunity has never presented itself and it probably never will. But all I can do is sit here and say what I think at the moment. But until I am truly challenged as a man, I can never ever tell you that I am 100% perfect or will be in any decision that I could have the opportunity to make. And I will be the first to recognize that. I guess technically the second, because Mr. Frankl pretty much already did that, or Dr. Frankl. But this book, that is just another example of how this book makes you realize the reality of so many things that were tried, that people tried to teach us when we were in school. And what kind of pisses me off is I've noticed after reading such books that things are really only taught from a specific point of view or from a specific type of belief when you're in school. Now, I had a couple of teachers, and I just messaged one tonight that weren't necessarily like that. But for the most part, you don't realize that you are only being taught to see things one way until you take that extra step in life, which sadly a lot of people don't really get there. Um, it's it's like I said in the beginning. it's a really tough thing to think about. And I think what makes it more challenging is nobody, or I guess most people, want to admit that there's so much more work to be done. It's very tough because we wish that our institutions were the things that were giving us all the answers after taking years of our lives. We wish that the things that we are learning from the tools, from the industries, from the assistants, or there's a term that I'm looking for if you can't tell. We want to believe that the things that are being offered to us are offered to us for the best benefit of us. But the truth is, it's a lot more complicated than that. And this book is a good example. You have a teacher that sits in front of a podium or in front of a board and teaches you what the school tells you to teach you about the Holocaust. Why not learn about the Holocaust from somebody that's actually been there themselves? Why not learn about the Holocaust from someone that's been there, from multiple people who have been there themselves? Because I remember in school they brought up a couple of people, and one of the only ones I remember was the teacher emphasizing that, and this is weird to me, and I believe I was in middle school or freshman year. The teacher definitely taught us about somebody who no longer believed in Jesus because he says in an open statement, why would I believe in somebody who would allow such horrible things to happen? And as a kid, you're like, that makes so much sense. But now that I'm an adult and I've read about somebody that never let go of God, even after experiencing all of this and losing everything he loved. 16 million copies sold, by the way. You're like, wait a minute, there's more to this. There's another way of thinking about it. And that's very important. That's extremely crucial. But again, so many people don't take that experience, mostly because that also involves us having to take an initiative in ourselves. And I hate to say it, but I don't think just going to school, as challenging as it is necessarily taking the initiative. And this is where I also talk about working smarter, not harder. We work really hard to get our degrees in the Western culture. We sure do. And I would never knock somebody that's willing to do that. But if you made the decision to take that route, the truth is that's just scratching the surface, barely the beginning. And that's what makes books like this so beautiful. By the way, let's start shifting gears here. Back to continuing my book review. I did manage to flip to the page where I was bringing up earlier how people who ultimately do have a purpose, and I believe this was on the topic of love. When you have a purpose, you can survive. And this is where he was quoting it from. And I'm gonna butcher the heck out of this name. Forgive me. If any of you guys actually speak the language that this is written in, correct me. All right. But let's get into it. As we said before, any attempt to restore a man's inner strength in the camp had first to succeed in showing him some future goal. Here's the quote. Nietzsche's words. He who truly has a why to live for can bear with almost any how. This could be the guiding motto for all psychotherapeutic and psychohygienic efforts regarding prisoners. I'm just going to flip to part 2 because I will sit here ranting for hours. All right. Yep, that's pretty much what he said. And if any of you guys know who that originated from, please let me know because I'm sure I butchered that name and I apologize. But Elijah's confession. I stop and I have to Google the terms for a lot of words, and I will listen to them because I mispronounce so many words. It's quite embarrassing to admit, but it happens. So Before I close out my review from part one of the book, let's talk about the grief section. When life throws an event at you that's so unfortunate that you almost feel like you have nothing left to live for, that it is where it's most important for you to find that purpose. If you've lost somebody that you loved, but you have children with that person, at that point, your purpose is to live for your children. The inevitable truth is that we all go. We're humans. It's unavoidable. We were born to die. And the way you look at that will really determine the quality of your life. I have really been working on realizing that our nature is actually very beautiful because we have this opportunity to create these eternal memories and be this conscious life form of energy and matter in this what seems like an impossible universe that exists on a perfect 1% ratio. It almost makes me more thankful for the fact that we live and we die. And in many ways, it kind of hurts to think about the millions of people who almost feel like this is a waste. I hate watching those videos on the internet where those people will talk about the deathbed confessions of the elderly. And it's terrifying. And I hate that this is shared more than the positive things, but that is ultimately what our media is, right? It's fear monger. Eventually, you have to recognize the difference between things that are real and things that aren't. Life is real. Love, emotion, passion, adventure, your experiences, memories, they're all real. Money, homes, loans, debt, taxes, businesses, they're not. If this world was to completely get swallowed up by the sun at this very moment, one thing that will never go away is our spot in the universe. Do we consciously die? Yes. Are we buried in the ground? Yes. But we, as an existence, cannot be taken out of this timeline. We've existed. We're here. We have permanently made our place in this universe. I guess that's just a corny way of saying death isn't the end. Maybe this sounds something like a theory, but I just find it almost unbelievable to think about how we are all so. Here's an example. Okay, let me just say this. When you're in school and you learn about the cycle of rain or water or whatever, and there's condensation and evaporation and well, I'm sorry, evaporation, condensation, it rains and all this stuff. And I remember asking my teacher because and this was elementary school, my goodness. Um, she was explaining how water is pretty much just recycled. And I'm like, wait, we're drinking George Washington's pee? And she was like, actually, yes. And it just makes me think about in one way or another, whether it's our memories, whether it's our, oh gosh, forgive me, whether it's our feces, whether it's something that we've done or for humanity or whatever, the things that we don't seem to pay attention to the most are our permanent markings in this universe. So I'm saying is if the world was to completely blow up, our energy is still there. Traces of what once was is still there. And even though we're not consciously here, it doesn't mean the memories never existed. And I guess that's almost very somewhat theoretical to get into and more on the physics side of, what, yeah, all that crazy stuff and the different dimensions or interlinks. But what I'm saying is, I think I've said enough to make you understand that there are many things that matter. And when unfortunate things happen in life, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the end of everything. Is it upsetting? And is it very sad? Absolutely. It sucks. I'm not going to act like it's all sunshine and rainbows, but there is never ever a reason for somebody to not have a purpose to be here. Seriously. I just think that it's the fact that we have dove away from the truth in our existence and our natural being and put it into the things that don't matter, where we start to forget how important we really are. And actually, Dr. Frankl does talk about this as well, is no matter what position you're put in, no matter how horrible, and this is somebody that was in the concentration camps, one thing that is never taken away from you is your freedom. It's the truth. You can be sitting in the worst prison ever in the history of the world. They can't determine your thoughts. You have a decision to take action at any moment, whether it's scream or yell or do something terrible to yourself or try to escape or just sit there and come up with your own stories. I mean, that's what Dr. Frankl did. He talks about how he was writing on napkins and hiding things. And I think he had a notebook that was completely taken away from him by one of the guards. But you can always have a purpose to hold on to, whether it's a piece of work that you want to publish and get out there someday, or a discovery that you want to make, or somebody or people that you love that you have to be there for. And I feel like I'm starting to do this, but overall, those are simplified, summarized, and somewhat more personal versions of things that this book really makes you get into. So what I want to do is this. This is how I want to end this because I feel like I ranted so much. I'll go through and I'll read a few quotes, and instead of ranting about them, let's just get into them. Let's enjoy this. All right. Because I feel bad. I spent like 30 minutes talking about, or however long, talking about the first part of the book. I want you guys to get a piece of some of his actual writing on his study. So he has something called uh, neurodynamics here. Uh, to be sure, man's search for meaning may arouse inner tension rather than inner equilibrium. However, precisely such tension is an indispensable prerequisite of mental health. There is nothing in the world, I venture to say, that would so effectively help one to survive even the worst conditions as the knowledge that there is a meaning in one's life. That was amazing. Let's skip forward a little bit. Such attention is inherent in the human being and therefore is indispensable to mental well being. We should not, then, be hesitant about challenging man what a potential meaning for him to fulfill. I consider it a dangerous misconception of mental hygiene to assume that what man needs in the first place is equilibrium, or, as it is called in biology, homeostasis, i.e., attention state. What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. I'm going to go through here. Oh, that is a long, long, long one. The existential vacuum, categorical imperative. Let's do this one. I doubt whether a doctor can answer this question in general terms, for the meaning of life differs from man to man, from day to day, and from hour to hour. What matters, therefore, is not the meaning of life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at a given moment. To put the question in general terms would be comparable to the question posed to a chess champion. Tell me, master, what is the best move in the world? There simply is no such thing as the best or even a good move apart from a particular situation in a game and the particular personality of one's opponent. The same holds for human existence. One should not search for an abstract meaning of life. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life to carry out a concrete assignment which demands fulfillment. As each situation in life represents a challenge to man and presents a problem for him to solve, the question of the meaning of life may actually be reversed. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only represent by being responsible. Thus, logotherapy sees in responsibleness the very essence of human existence. Okay, you know what? That's the last piece of the book I'm going to read, because if that didn't make you want to buy it, I don't know what will. Holy smokes. Let's just take a moment. Let's take a sip. Fantastic. Phenomenal. Um, that does remind me of one thing that he did bring up, where he talks about the Statue of Liberty and freedom, and he says that while the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast should also match a statue of responsibleness on the West Coast, because he does talk about how freedom doesn't necessarily mean the ability to just be responsibleness, right? A lot of people think, oh, I'm free, so I should be able to treat people as dirty as I want or say things about people as much as I want. I should be able to hate this race and hate that race and say piss off to anybody that I want. No, people should be responsible with their liberty. And that is one thing that we have not even considered or talked about in our modern world of media, because everybody just thinks that freedom means I have this slice of the pie and I can go ahead and cut right into yours because mine is the only one that matters. No, not at all. So, my goodness, I feel like I've already talked enough, and I'm glad I got to quote that piece of the book. But Viktor E. Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, you guys, please check it out. And again, I know it's Man's Search for Meaning, and I did point out before I even read the quotes is a lot of this, he says man or just he, but this applies for anybody, anybody. And in no way or fashion or form does Dr. Frankl say that he specifically wants to just apply it to men. I really do think it was just the time at which he was alive and born in, and especially the fact that with that time of history, he was at the place that he was at, which was Germany during World War II. So yeah, the book is obviously going to be written explaining amazing concepts in somewhat of a, I wouldn't say singular, of a way that only seems to apply to one gender. Not true. No. Honestly, like I said, I'm going to say it again. I said it in the beginning of the podcast. If he was alive today, or if he was writing this book today in modern times, I don't think it would be called Man's Search for Meaning. And I would also recommend, and I will put a YouTube link out in the bio of this podcast. I'm listening to some of his interviews. Amazing, amazing speaker. And he really does dive deep into a lot of concepts that he wrote into this book. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is it for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed this. I look further to doing more book reviews. The next one is definitely going to be fiction. But yeah, let's keep going on. Let's enjoy the life we're living and take advantage of all the opportunities we have. And I think it's important for us to recognize at the end of all this, life really is good for us. We are very blessed. We are born in a great time in history. And despite all of the inaccurate information that the media wants to put out there that's scary and makes us wonder about whatever, we have homes, we have our loved ones, we have people that are there for us, and we're all experiencing this natural cycle of life. Which, what more could you possibly ask for? So I love you guys. Looking forward to the future. With that, ETVT out of here.